The Saints had been teetering on being mid for the last 2 years, and they were looking to change that this past season. One of the first big splashes in last year's offseason actually happened well before the new league year rang in, as they signed recently released Raiders quarterback Derek Carr to a big fat 4-year deal. And now that he was with his first head coach Dennis Allen again, it seemed like the New Orleans Saints were going to retake their place back on top in what was going to be a very weak NFC South, where you had questions all around at quarterback, including New Orleans Saints. Don't get me wrong. The Saints had plenty of questions of their own all around this team, including with their quarterback, Derek Carr. But obviously, there's plenty of questions within the division in of itself. So when you look at the Saints team, when you look at what went right with this team, you look at that offense, especially the receiving core, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. If I try to pronounce that a million times, that last name. But no, seriously, these two receivers were the frequent targets for Derek Carr, and they had themselves a good year. Olave had another 1,000-yard season in his second year. Shaheed nearly cracking that as well. But they were pretty effective performers for that team. And Shaheed doing great special teams work for the punting unit. And they just gave the life to the Saints in what was a pretty stale offense. Defensively, the secondary unit in what was considered one of the best defenses in the NFL a couple years ago, it's kind of taken a step back this past season. But their secondary unit was still a very good unit, despite, like I said, finishing overall as middle of the pack. This was an area that they really shined. You have a back line that consists of corners Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo at corner, safety Tyrann Mathieu, and then linebacker Demario Davis. They covered the field relatively well, and this is despite still Marshawn Lattimore being lost for the last 7 games of the season. So they covered the field relatively well, despite the points that they gave up due to, barely allowing any big plays from happening in the air. And they were able to create a lot of turnovers with their defensive coaches, giving them a lot of good plays, good reads. So this secondary unit, despite this defense being just in the middle line, they were a pretty good unit. Unfortunately, the other side of the defense, though, they couldn't hold its end of the bargain. So that Saints front seven, that featured star defensive edge rusher Cameron Jordan, it was bad. It had so much trouble pressuring and sacking the quarterback all season, let alone stopping the run. They were a very bad run-stopping team. And this is coming from the fact that Dennis Allen brought in new coaches and a couple of new players within the rotation and tried out various different rotations throughout the season. And the execution on the field just didn't result in what he wanted. So when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's just like all you have in that pass rush is Cameron Jordan. And he can't do it alone. He's getting older. He's going to be turning 35. And it's just like, you got to get the man some help. So help him out, man. And then going back to that offense, for as good as Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are, it's like the play calling and some of the supporting cast, and that includes Derek Carr too, it was stale. It's stale as, I guess, vinegar potato chips. So Saints fans, I kind of warned them about this in my season preview of this. They should have known what they were in for when this team signed Derek Carr and saw what he did in Oakland/Vegas with the Raiders for the last near decade. He's a very conservative quarterback that will take a midfield, that won't take a midfield or deep pass for the most part, but he will from time to time. But for the most part, he heavily relies on the check down and relies on the yards after catch. So that's the kind of quarterback Derek Carr is. He not really a very risky quarterback. And for the rushing attack, that's been heavily reliant on Alvin Kamara the last couple of years, it's slowed down. I mean, Kamara's not getting older. I mean, he's missed a couple of games too, so he's kind of had a little bit of trouble staying healthy. And then Taysom Hill, the gadget player, he he hasn't been as effective because, well, I guess defenses are reading him better, or the play calling hasn't been good. Especially that offensive line, very, very poor in run blocking and pass protection. It also contributed to the rushing woes of Kamara and Taysom Hill. And then going back to Derek Carr, he was also in and out of the lineup a couple of games. So it started in week 3 when they went to Green Bay to play the Packers, and Carr went down with a shoulder injury. And the next week he tried to play through it, but they got blown out by the Bucs. And then he still tried to play through it with some mixed results. And it became a little bit of concern because there's another injury that occurred. It was a separate injury with the concussion, and Carr got knocked out in the loss to the Vikings. So the injuries, yes, they weren't long term, but one would have to wonder if it was wise to have Derek Carr keep playing through what ended up sounding like multiple games throughout the year. I mean, I commend Derek Carr for his toughness, but it's just like the coaches have to understand, like, if he's like that hurt, like you got to step in, like, let him rest for like a week or two if he's that badly hurt with multiple injuries. So the Saints did manage to go on a little bit of a run to close out the year. But the problem is like by the time they were like that close to playoff contention, it was too little too late. Like by the time we got to week 17, they beat the Bucs. And well, all they could do is like, well, we can win our game against Atlanta, but we still need some help from the Bucs. And they beat Atlanta, but they played the Bucs played the Panthers. So it was pretty much too little too late. They're still eliminated from playoff contention due to the Packers winning their game, and then the Bucs won their game too. So that was a wrap on another disappointing season for the New Orleans Saints. From a big picture perspective, though, had the Saints made the playoffs as the NFC South champion or as a wild card by a miracle chance, they would have gotten their butts whooped because they play very conservatively on offense, and they were still very lacking in the trenches on defense. And that would have exposed their secondary for as good as that played all year. So all in all, it was a very underachieving season for a team that had pretty good odds at winning a very weak division in the NFC South this past season. So I don't really know where you go for here if you're the New Orleans Saints, because when you look at their offseason and how it started, actually before it started, they were like in the last couple of years in the major red. They were like the team with the most red in the NFL, around $90 million in the toilet. That's bad. Negative. Danito. Terrible. But they did get back up under the cap like a week or two ago, so that was good for them. But still, $90 million over the line, really bad. So anyway, they do have a first round pick at number 14, kind of like where they were last year, I believe. Oh no, 2 years ago. So that's something. When you look at their free agents, not too many that they need to worry about, like safeties Jonathan Abram, Lonnie Johnson Jr., corner Isaiah Yeadam, and then backup quarterback Jameis Winston. So he hit the free agent market for the first time in quite some time. And then looking at some of the moves that they already made, they couldn't do much because obviously they didn't have money. But to try and get under the cap, they made some extensions to Tyrann Mathieu and Demario Davis. And they did sign linebacker Willie Gay to a 1-year deal from the Chiefs. So, hey, they were able to do something with that money that they re-got. Looking at some of the needs that they need to address during this offseason, if they can. They're most likely going to try to do that during the draft. They got to rehaul that entire defensive line because all you have there is Cameron Jordan. And he doesn't have much help, nor does he have much time in the league left. He's going to be 35 years old by the time training camp starts. And opposite him is edge rusher Peyton Turner, and he's not that much help. And the interior defensive line really struggled in the back half of the year. So they got to use their draft assets to upgrade at every position possible, aside from Cameron Jordan. And then staying within the defense, you got to get some help for Marshawn Lattimore. The Saints secondary, yes, it was the better unit defensively. They still need some help to go and support their Pro Bowl corner. And then offensively, go and get some more help behind Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, because outside of those two, there's nobody else. And yeah, sure, you had Jimmy Graham, but I mean, was he really reliable this past year? I mean, outside of the one red zone or two touchdown. But anyway, what I'm saying is that they don't have that other receiving threat. Michael Thomas, I think he's done. He's been very unreliable since coming back from injury like last year. So the Saints need to find another receiver or two to go alongside their new duo. So the Saints this year, very underachieving team this past season in 2023. So because they were pretty much the favorite, like I said, to win this division in the NFC South. But once again, they disappointed and missed the playoffs. So as it was in the last 2 years, this is what their status quo is. Stuck in cap hell with an aging roster and just trying to get by with what they can and what they can try to add after getting past their heavy red money line. I mean, they could try to compete again for the division in 2024. However, even if they did, steal the division from whether it's the Bucks or the Falcons this coming year. And the year, it's just going to be like this past year and the year before that, and maybe even 2021. The result may be the same. They're just going to be mid in the big hard.